go through. And they're going to look at the competitive effects. They're going to look at the market in general. They're going to look at consumer protection and just the issues that come with that. Because one of the biggest things that Microsoft gets, games aside, they get. Today on the Nebulos Entertainment Podcast, we are going to be talking Microsoft, Activision, and what that acquisition means for you as a player, and what basically took place. We know that this is probably not the first time that you're listening to Microsoft and Activision, but Eric and I do have our own opinions and just some industry news as well for this. So we're going to start off first by Eric just going over a little bit about the Patreon and the development blogs that we have released this prior week. Eric, welcome.
Hello. Yes, so this past week I actually started talking about the beginning stages of how I go about laying a foundation for a project idea, including story writing, gathering art references, and music. And I also gave a short reflective journal on the release of our first project. So that's on there if you want to check it out.
Yeah, so we are going to be diving into the full release of Stormward Sales in its own episode. We're going to make sure that we have Connor on. If Jeremy would like to be on as well, they are more than welcome to. And Eric will, I'm sure, have a lot of insight to the release of that game. So that'll be its own episode.
Right,
yeah, it'll be a long one. It'll be a long one.
For sure.
But yeah, so anyway, so last week, Microsoft made a lot of noise with the potential buyout of Activision Blizzard, which came in at $68.7 million roughly. So,
billion,
this is going to, or billion, sorry, yeah, billion, with a B, billion, big billions. So this is going to come with some huge names. Obviously, you have Call of Duty, you have Diablo, you have the WoW franchise, you have Overwatch, right? You have, even with the mobile game, you have Candy Crush, right? Because the activation of King comes with that as well, because Activision Blizzard owned King. So there is a lot that is coming to the arsenal of Microsoft and Xbox. So this deal, while it was announced, it's not really expected to close until mid-2023. And that is because of the whole back-end legal jargon that needs to be set in place first before, things can obviously go through and be finalized. So I think, Activision Blizzard was thrown a lifeline here. They were thrown a lifeline here from Microsoft, and this is just because of all the backlash that Blizzard has had over these last, I would say, what do you think, Eric? Like, it's been over a year, right? It's been a decent. They've been under the microscope for a while now.
Yeah, I think the allegations from, or the investigation from California was, I want to say that was announced might have been like August. I should probably know that a bit better, but it's actually not that old that they had this whole sort of falling out with everything that they've done. So it's really interesting.
Right. Yeah. So, there's no guarantee that this deal is successful by any means. However, Activision Blizzard is a huge name. They come with a lot of property. Because, when it comes to making acquisitions, you have a lot of issues that could go astray, which is culture. You could have locations. You could have people, right? You can have poor management like we're seeing with Blizzard. You can have unmatched expectations of what Microsoft might expect from Blizzard and everything that comes with it. So it doesn't necessarily mean that this deal is going to be 100% successful. When Microsoft acquired, Bethesda, Eric, like a few years ago.
Technically, yes.
Well, yeah, so they're still setting up, setting up some expectations from that as well, because you haven't really seen as much from that particular acquisition that you're going to see probably firsthand right with Activision Blizzard. I think that'll take a little bit longer, but there's a lot of things that could go wrong here, and first and foremost is it's actually having this acquisition go through, this buyout actually go through after all the legal matters, because that was one of the first things that people took to social media to say that this is too big of an acquisition. There's too many moving parts. You're creating more power to the big players, which is screwing the lower players and the smaller games in the industry. Which, I mean, they're not necessarily wrong, right? They're not wrong. So, Microsoft is already a huge monster in the gaming space, and they've done it from doing stuff like this, buyouts, acquisitions, and they already have a huge, impressive showcase, but they're continuing to grow that. Right? But you still have the Department of Justice, you still have the FTC that has to look at all this stuff to make sure that it is something that can, go through. And they're going to look at the competitive effects, they're going to look at the market in general, they're going to look at consumer protection and just the issues that come with that, because one of the biggest things that Microsoft gets, games aside, they get user data. They get your data, they get my data, they get Eric's data. They get, I believe it's over 400 million players throughout Activision Blizzard. They get 400 million players' data. So, that is huge when it comes to adding that to the back end and the arsenal of Microsoft. So there's a lot of play here when it comes to the Metaverse, because this is a huge move in the Metaverse. And if anybody had listened to like the earnings report and the earnings call, there was a lot of talk for the Metaverse. But as you can expect, that is a very, I would say, Eric, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that is a very big play for the investors of a company. So, they're putting a lot of cards in for the Metaverse here.
Right. And I think it's sort of like Microsoft kind of batting against the Metaverse. I don't know a ton about the Metaverse and its whole goal, so I am regrettably uninformed on that, but I think ignorance is bliss in this scenario when it comes to dealing with things like this. So, yeah, the perspective that I see it from is, as the gamer, like, I've been a big Blizzard fan for, like, a large portion of my life, so curious to see what will happen with, like, the existing franchises and characters and worlds and games and things like that.
Right. Yeah. No. There's a lot of this is such a huge thing for just the gaming industry and video games in general and companies, because now it raises questions of, well, what can Sony do to basically retaliate, and what can Sony do to continue to be a big player? They have a lot of exclusives, right? Because if you look at this deal, brings Microsoft now, it brings it up to number 3 in terms of the biggest revenued companies in the gaming industry. So now it's below Tencent, and it's below Sony. So it's still sitting. It jumped up a lot higher, but it's still below Sony and Tencent. But it's only below Sony by, I think, like a couple billion. Which is not even, in retrospect, like, this deal was huge. It's going to be huge for Microsoft to bring them really up to speed here.
Oh, for sure. And it can also depend on what they do with the existing content that is on Sony's platforms. And that's a whole other can of worms. But, like, if they say take Call of Duty off of PlayStation platforms in a few years, that might be a large selling point for a lot of players that are, Sony PlayStation owners to make the switch. So it's really cool. Yeah.
So do you see it, you think it's going to go that way? Do you think that, because they talk a lot about the gamers right now, right? So, like, one of the biggest things for Microsoft with this deal is that they are announcing that they want to continue to bring games and just experiences to multiple platforms, right? For a bunch of people, just continue to create experiences for the players, right? So in doing so, do you think that it becomes, they contradict themselves if they were to make them more Microsoft and Xbox exclusive down the road?
And they did say that they are going to continue to support games on the platforms they are on, but that, to me, is like kind of, I don't want to say PR speak, but does that mean just the games that are out now? There's a lot of games from, let's just say, Blizzard, like Diablo 4, Overwatch 2, potential StarCraft, expansion, or I guess sequel, not expansion. So, like, games like that, they don't have to support on any platform because they don't exist on any platform right now. So they could say down the road, hey, Diablo 4 is an Xbox exclusive, and that would deal a huge blow.
Well, and here's what they need to do, right? They need to just stay in the good graces until this deal is finalized. So, they don't need to be going making enemies right now by saying all of a sudden they're going to be cutting it off from Sony and bringing it only to Microsoft. So I think that they're doing it right by, keeping everybody calm, waiting for this deal to be finalized, and then seeing how it plays out.
For sure.
Because to your point, like, it can be a PR thing right now when they just say, yep, like, we're going to keep it as is. And then, down the road, they might reevaluate because they have the cards. They can do so. Mm-hmm. If this deal goes through, they can do so. And from a business perspective, if we're talking about like capitalism and everything, I mean, why wouldn't they? Like that might be their move if they want to, if they care about the gamers and the experience of, bringing it to gamers in general in the community, they'll allow the games to remain on multiple platforms. However, if it comes to the point where they need and want more money, then they're going to probably take the capitalism route and optimize what they have. However, they do not, it's not like they are just scrambling for money. This is a cash deal. Okay, this is a cash deal. $69 billion cash deal. That is ridiculous.
That's insane.
They have, what is it? They have over like $130 billion just in cash. Just in cash. Which is ridiculous. But like Microsoft, they are a very powerful company. And it's taken a long time to get to this point. But they are very smart with what they're doing. I think that, down the road, it's going to be hard for companies like ours, for example, Eric, and like other indie devs to build a name for themselves. And I don't think anybody would get to the level of like Microsoft and Sony. I think that that's at this stage in the game, and as we continue in the future, it's just going to become unrealistic. So they're going to have to build themselves up to the point where they do get acquired by somebody else. Right. And one of the big name players. I just think that that's just the way things are going. And, it's going to be, because like you've like Netflix getting into gaming, like all these bigger companies are going to get into gaming to the point where in reality, like indie companies, they're going to look to push towards platforms and like bigger companies that favor them, right? So like Microsoft does favor indie devs. There's not really a lot I'm sure that there's some, but none off the top of my head, of complaints that indie devs have for the Microsoft community in terms of releasing with Microsoft and being treated unfairly and poorly to that extent. So, you have to look at these other players. So like you have Sony, you have Tencent, you have Apple, you have Google, like if we're talking mobile too, right? And you have like Netflix is coming in. Like you have these other big companies and corporations that are pushing to the gaming community. So indie devs such as like Nebulos, and a lot of other companies on the smaller scale are going to push towards what favors them, right? So like even Epic is a huge company, right? And Epic can acquire smaller indie devs too. So, they're going to, each of these big corporations are going to continue to build their arsenal and do limited releases because they're all going to, I'm sure, like Netflix doesn't have its own platform right now, I don't believe, in terms of releasing the reach that like obviously Apple and Google and Microsoft has and Sony has. But that doesn't mean that they might not get there in the future. I don't know. They've got a lot of money too.
Yeah.
But, from an indie company, you have to look at what is going to be best for like my company and the future of what we want to do. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out and how these other companies such as Sony and maybe Tencent and maybe Google, how they retaliate to something like this. Because this is huge. This is shaking the industry, and you wouldn't really expect it. Like I wouldn't have expected this. So,
right.
Like Eric, so if the pandemic never happened, is this something that you would still expect to be done? This acquisition from Microsoft to Activision Blizzard?
Maybe not right now, but I think we sort of talked about just before this call the boom in gaming in the last, year and a half, 2 years due to the pandemic. I think it totally caused, Microsoft to maybe reevaluate how they are approaching their their platform essentially. So and then it's on the other hand with, when did they start considering it and when did they start putting wheels in motion? And then when did the California lawsuit against Activision Blizzard come out? And did that, make them hesitate?
Right.
Did it make them refigure their terms? Like, there's so many really interesting things I think we'll hear a lot more about in the upcoming months. You'll hear from developers and executives and all that kind of stuff as they talk about stuff and get into interviews. So I'm just very curious to see and hear what will, come of all of this.
Right. Well, Microsoft would have had to have known the backlash coming. So it might have adjusted the price for what they were willing to offer to Blizzard. But, they still have, if this deal were to go south and not happen, Microsoft would still owe Activision $3 billion. Obviously they're putting up $69 billion. So like $3 billion is nothing in terms of like, the 69 that they're buying right now. However, that is still enough when you're not getting the return in the long game process that they're thinking of. So when you look at the way that these companies are ran, Activision Blizzard seems to be more of a short game, right? They seem to be, the turnover, money. Microsoft, I would say, plays more to the long-term effect and the long-term. So there's a big chance, and this is something that I saw Bobby and Phil talking about in an interview, is that Bobby wants to bring back like a few games such as like Guitar Hero, right? Mm-hmm. So Phil being like, okay, well we'll take a look at that. Maybe there's a long-term run there to bring something like that back, but you just need the proper resources, right? So like I think Microsoft will be able to take the games that Blizzard has and continue to build more of a long-term for each game and each project instead of focusing heavily on the short term. Because one thing I hope does not change, from a viewing perspective, are the trailers. Like, the trailers are ridiculous. The cinematics are absolutely insane. Like, Blizzard, in my opinion, is unmatched in this industry for what they can do in terms of cinematic.
Right.
So, there is a great chance here that maybe we start to see, because there's a lot of money. There's a lot of money, right? And they're getting into, obviously, the gaming industry, and we're talking about, like, the cinematic side of things. So maybe there are more cinematics coming, more short films. Maybe there could be a video. I don't know. The sky's the limit with this deal in retrospect, because the pockets are so big.
Right, and this, we could have a discussion another day, and I think it would be a really good podcast to get into, would be Riot Games and their sort of surge into storytelling and building. They've been building out their franchises for a while. Like, they just had that show on Netflix called Arcane. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So, yeah, does this sort of deal hopefully give the support to the studios to create more content they want to create? That's what I would hope. But you never know.
And here's the thing: is these studios have obviously gotten here, like indie studios get to the point where somebody wants to acquire them by themselves a lot of the times, right? Like by staying true to who they are, and in the company and building what they want to build. So like don't come in and change it too much, because then the people that are creating the games might lose the passion, the drive, and the love for it. I do think that obviously Activision Blizzard has a lot of skeletons in the closet that Microsoft will need to address, that Microsoft will have to handle very delicately, but make a huge change to. And I know that they've already started kicking people out the door. Bobby's out after the acquisition's finalized, but he's not going without a big payday. So there's going to be a lot of money there. So Eric, in terms of Microsoft continuing to buy studios, and we're talking about, just swallowing up studios and indie devs, so on and so forth, do you see them making more acquisitions? If so, do you see them being like any big ones? Like Nintendo will never sell its soul to a bigger studio. What about like EA? What do you see there? Or maybe like DICE, because EA and DICE. Because if we're talking like shooters now that Microsoft has Halo, Call of Duty, what about Battlefield? Do you see anything there?
I don't know how the corporate structure of EA and all of that goes about its daily whatever, but I could see them. I honestly feel like I see Microsoft aiming for more indie studios, because we talked about a little earlier that Connor had suggested I look into, indie studios giving feedback on Game Pass, because I was really curious how Game Pass impacts indie devs, because you're not selling a straight up copy of your game. It's rolled into a subscription that Microsoft makes money off of. But
Right.
it seems, from everything I've seen, it seems like indie developers say when their games go on Game Pass, people getting eyes on their games cause sales to go up through the roof. Like, I know,
Yep.
I believe it's Death's Door saw a huge increase in Steam sales after they came out on Game Pass. It might have been Death's Door. I might be misinformed about which game it was, but it's just really interesting to see, because, like, I think that there is a lot of potential for that to be a really good platform for indie devs to get their games noticed. And then you have people that want to support that, so they go and buy the actual game.
Right. I don't think that there will ever be an indie dev company that complains for getting eyes on their game. So, there is no, to the point, Eric, that you're making, it's when these companies, these smaller companies, get eyes on their game, whether it's from Xbox, or Sony, like whoever, right? They do see a lot more sales and growth on Steam, for example, right? So as an indie company, all people want to do, like all we want to do, and a lot of other companies like us want to do, is get our game out there, right? Get people to play it, get people to get their eyes on it, get feedback, get a little bit of growth to the point where they can handle it. It's crazy. I don't think that they would get mad for getting eyes on it. And to your point, Eric, as we look into the feedback from indie devs to Microsoft and the Game Pass, there really hasn't been a lot, if any, of negative feedback driving, like bad articles, really. So
yeah, at least we haven't seen it. It probably exists.
Right.
There's people that have bad experiences everywhere, but it does seem that it is a just generally positive step for an indie dev to have their game featured on Game Pass.
If Microsoft continues down this route of being very community driven, of helping smaller indie companies, which can basically form the backbone of Microsoft Gaming, there might be nobody stopping them. And that's if they stay true to what they're doing right now. Because they've grown exponentially these last few years. If they continue to do what they're doing, I mean, how would you see Sony responding to this?
Honestly, I think they have to do... Basically, they have to play from Microsoft's handbook. They have to do something similar. Their PlayStation Now service, I think, has potential. I just think it needs to be rolled into PlayStation Plus, which there are rumors that it might be. And then they need to put on their big titles as day one, PlayStation Now or PlayStation Plus content. Like God of War Ragnarok, just as an example. If that, if they were to come out next week and say, hey, we're doing a Game Pass-like system with, God of War Ragnarok coming to it day one, that would be a pretty big step. Can I see them doing that? I don't know. But I do think that they need to keep building up indies and stuff like that, especially because the indie scene and indie games, think about, like, even just the Game Awards this past year. An indie game, It Takes Two, won Game of the Year over top AAA games. That's huge. Hades, indie game, fantastic sales, awesome, like, reception. Like, everybody loves Hades. Everybody I know loves Hades. So I do think that there is kind of a shift going on, and there has been for a while, where indies are really getting the content out there that is what players want to play, and that is the critical thing.
That's because, like, indie devs are the people. Like there's no corporate like bureaucracy that pushes into the like smaller indie devs that
Right.
are at least the majority of the time, right? That so like they're still the people. We are still the people. So like we know what players want to experience, right? That they might not be getting from the double or the triple A studios, these bigger studios that heavily rely on investors, a great stock price, the market, blah blah blah, the
That's
bureaucracy, the capitalism, shit like
that's a
that, right?
huge factor.
Right. So these
Investors.
companies, right? Yeah, because here's the thing: while investors might have deep pockets, they 9 times out of 10 don't have the full understanding of what the bottom line wants in terms of us as the players.
Right. And that's
So
that's what's pushing microtransactions into games. That's what's pushing, season passes and all that kind of stuff where it's like all this bolt-on money-driven content.
right.
People want fun-driven content. Where when you're
Right.
adding
So-
something, you're giving them value in their time, not
Right.
their wallet.
Right. No, I agree. So, with this said, the last topic, let's talk about Phil Spencer. Because when he came into Microsoft, he basically came into a shit show. I think that he's turned it around pretty well. I think that, people have a lot of love for what Phil has basically inherited and built up over the years. Now that we're to this point, and people, because okay, right, the whole topic, Microsoft, Activision Blizzard, people hate Bobby. They can't stand good old Bob. So this is, in my opinion, and Eric, it might be yours as well, this is a better look for Phil Spencer, because if he could come in and bring the love and the drive and the equality back to Activision Blizzard, or create it, maybe it was never there before, to Activision Blizzard, then this could be like the number one spot on this man's resume and his build, like his overall portfolio of his life, right?
Yeah,
like this right here
everything
could be
he's
it.
done, every single thing he's done has been, I'm sure there's things that aren't great.
Right.
But
No, right. From the big picture. Big picture.
To me, what I would credit him with most importantly is the momentum that he's building. He's getting, you talked about earlier, he's not immediately concerned with what is going on right here, right now. Obviously, he is to an extent. He has the life of Xbox, the life of Microsoft, whatever you want to call it, the long-term vision for it is there. And that, to me, is huge. And this, like you said, if he can do this, and if he can get, Activision Blizzard moving in the right direction in the eyes of its employees, its fans, that'll be huge. Turning favor will be tough, but if he can do it, and if like all the other Xbox executives or whatever, whoever's involved can get that ship turned in a positive direction, that'll be one of the biggest stories ever.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think Activision Blizzard is obviously still a force, right? However, if they create it into a favorable force and we put basically all the shit that it's been getting, we fix it, right? If he fixes it, then, dude, it could be huge. It can continue to be something that just hasn't been seen yet in the gaming industry.
Absolutely.
Microsoft is becoming a juggernaut, and they're doing it very, very well. So, the second part to this question, all right, Phil Spencer, we like the guy. What happens when his reign is over? Do you see him bringing in a successor that, will take over to the point that does like exactly what he does, has the same mentality, has the same mindset for the players, maybe like little to no microtransactions? Or is there a worry that the next person coming in, because it is, Microsoft and it is a huge fucking company, do you see somebody coming in as a successor and potentially raising the microtransactions and taking away from the community?
That's the big question mark. You would hope that with all the people involved, that the next person to come in would be, have those same values and the same vision, but you could get a Bobby. in there because Bobby is good at making money. And if they're looking to make money, they want somebody in there that's good to make. So it's a huge question mark. You hope for the best, but you never know.
Right.
And it happens with many other companies, like, Disney is a big one currently. I know that they switched from Bob Iger to, I think it's Bob Chapek, and I don't know a lot of the story, but I know that
all these Bob names, man.
I know.
All of a sudden, you're a CEO if your name is Bob.
Yeah, geez, I got the wrong namesake.
You and me both, man. You and me both.
But I know that the new, like, Bob Chapek is not in favor of the fan base. I don't know why. I'm not up to date on that, but I know that, like, a lot of people aren't a fan of him, and I don't know if it's for the same reason as sort of the Bobby Kotick, where it's money focused, not content focused. I don't know, but to me that's the big question mark: is whoever's in that seat, what is their focus? Quality, or quantity?
Right. As much as people want to, like, put full blame on one person, no matter what the company is.
Oh, right.
It's more than one person that takes this amount of backlash, that takes this amount of heat. So there needs to be, like, somewhat of an overhaul of the leadership that, obviously Activision Blizzard has. There was some overhaul in what Disney had. So, there's a lot that needs to be looked at. I think that at the end of the day, Eric, if we ask this final question, was this a good deal? Is this a good deal? I think that for Microsoft, it's a win. I think unfortunately for Bobby, it's a win for him because he's getting a huge payday, hundreds of millions of dollars on his way out the door. I think that even for Activision Blizzard, for the workers that want the equality and more opportunities, I think that this will be a win for them because there's going to be a change of pace. And I think for the players in the community up front, like right here, right now, it's going to be a win for us. So do you see everything as a win, or do you see a potential loss here right out of the gate with this buyout?
I see it as a win. I like you said, there's always question marks, but the hope for a better Activision Blizzard working conditions, culture, employee, fairness, all that stuff. If that is a result of this, huge win. If they, like we talked about, if money gets put into the content and the content can be what the players want, huge win. So I'm hopeful. I think it's a win.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are hopeful. So we hope that you found value in today's episode. If you loved it, feel free to share with your friends and family. As always, thank you for taking the time to listen. If you'd like to support us, we do have a Patreon. That link will be in the bio description as well. You can learn more about game development, get early access to the podcast, to beta testing our games, so on and so forth. There's a lot to offer there, starting at $1 a month. So you can also follow us on social media at Nebulos_ENT. And yeah, remember that there is a story in all of us. It's up to you to decide how you write yours. Have a great night.